Hello and welcome everyone to the world of Hack the Mountain 3.0 and this informative live session. I, Shubhangi Bhardwaj, on behalf of the entire team of HTM, would like to extend my regards and welcome you all to this community based hackathon where we regularly conduct webinars, workshops, HTM Qubits sessions like this one. All of this to strengthen your skills and help you perform better in the upcoming hackathon. Today, as you know, we all have gathered here for a very informative live session with the phenomenal Akash Mehta, sir. He's the founder at Apice Tech. Now, I would also like to tell more about him. Akash is an experienced software engineer. He did his master's in computer and electrical engineering from Boston University and worked in the US for few years. After experiencing the life and challenges faced by software engineers, he came back to his nation, India, and co founded the startup Apice Tech, which focuses on creating SDLC tools to simplify the life of developers. His vision is to develop every software engineer. His is to help every software engineer out there enjoy the creativity of coding while knowing the benefits their contributions make to their company and to bring up the quality of software being created in the software industry. Now, today he would be leading us on the topic of the on the coder's mindset through this session. Now, without any further delay, I would like him to take over. Sir, please take over.
Thank you, Shivangi. And thank you for the HTM team for having me. Welcome, everyone, for this talk. As she said, that I'm Akash Mehta, and I'm a co-founder of a company called Apice Tech, and we create products for automating and integrating the SDLC into a single framework. Like she said, my vision is to make the life of a coder more creative rather than bureaucratic, which it currently is. And to do that, it's a two-way street. It's to do with what the tools that we use, the industry that we live in, but also the way we think. So I want to talk about the coder's mindset, and I will start with with sharing my screen. Just give me a second. Is my screen visible? All right, give me a second. Okay, so the coder's mindset. Now, what is this topic? So right now we have a lot of people who might be freshers, who might just be finishing their college, who would look at this presentation, and this presentation is mainly to give them a little bit of an insight as to their way of thinking, what they should look forward to in their professional life, and how can they adapt fast into their careers. Without any further ado, I'll just start my presentation with a little bit of a story. So, two developers who are great friends, they decide that they want to buy a fancy lamp, okay? And they want the fanciest lamp out there. They look around, they search on Google, they find this shop called the Fancy Shop. And this fancy shop has the fanciest of items. So they walk into the shop and they look around, and right in the corner, they find the mother of all lamps. Now, this lamp has speaker systems, it has a Bluetooth connectivity, it has 15 different light settings, 15 different contrast setting, color settings. It's so advanced, it has an Alexa and Google Home built in. So you can imagine, it's like the mother of all lamps, it's the best lamp out there. They go home, and the first developer, he's a very meticulous kind. He wants to understand every nitty gritty before he gets into it. So before he even takes out the lamp, he takes out the manual. We all know those kind of people, right? They first take out the manual. So he takes out the manual and he starts to read it. But unfortunately, it's in German. Hmm. Now what? So the developer thinks and decides the only way I can read this manual and operate this lamp is to learn German. Perfectly makes sense. He looks around, he goes to Google, he finds the nearest German classes where he can physically go and talk to a teacher, and he finds that the class is around 30 minutes away. Uh, he knows that he can't drive, right? He doesn't have a car, he doesn't know how to drive. So he's thinking, how do I get to my class? Naturally, the only solution is, well, let's buy a car and let's learn how to drive. So he buys a car and he starts to learn how to drive. And he looks around for a driving lessons nearby, and he finds it that just down the street from his house, there's a driving school. So he goes to the driving school. Now, the first day of driving school, he accidentally drives over a nail. Okay, well, that's a hitch. So he thinks, how do I fix my tire? I can't just start working on it. What do I do? So he decides the only way he can think of is to join some automobile engineering. So he decides that I'm going to do automobile engineering so that I can fix my car, so that I can drive to my German classes, so that I can learn German and finally read the manual and operate the lamp. As you can expect, next step, he leaves his car on the side of the road, goes to the nearest university, and starts his classes. Great. 1 month later, the two developers decide, let's meet up for some drinks. Okay. So the first developer talks to the second developer. So, how far have you reached in figuring out that lamp? I'm still trying to finish my automobile engineering so that I can learn how to drive to my German classes and finally be able to read the manual. Now, the second developer, naturally, like all of us, looks at him like he's an idiot, like he's a lunatic. And she's like, what are you talking about? I got the lamp working 5 minutes after I got home. Now, the first developer, he's stunned. He's like, what? How? He knows that she doesn't know German. So he's like, you don't know German. You've never taken some German classes. How did you read the manual? How did you figure it out? So she looks at him again like he's an idiot and says, I just pressed all the buttons one by one until it turned on. Okay. So what was the point of this extremely vivid story? And by the way, I know that the drawings were amazing, but you can hold the applause for later. Now, this may be an extreme example, but development in the professional setting is very similar to the story. When you're given a task, it's rarely straightforward. It's usually something that leads you down a rabbit hole from one step to the next to the next. So, if you really think about it, 90 to 95% of being a developer is implementing existing flows rather than enhancing existing flows rather than implementing new ones. So what that means is that the logic, the algorithms, the technologies of whichever company you go to are already existing. You will just be working on enhancements. Now, let me give you an example from my personal experience. um, a couple of years ago, I was told to transit some Java applications into Spring Boot. So for those of you who don't know what Spring Boot is, it doesn't matter. Okay, just ignore it. And even if you don't know Java, that's also fine. Now, as far as my work was concerned, I managed to implement the conversions or the porting of almost all the applications. But when I came to the last application, all of a sudden nothing worked. All right. I tried everything. I went, I spent an entire week getting into Spring Boot, the nitty gritties of Spring Boot to try and figure out what happened. I went to Stack Overflow. I went through Google issues. I went through Reddit. I even went through some Chinese and Korean articles that I converted into English using Google Chrome. But absolutely nothing worked. So by the end of the day, I was going crazy, right? As you can expect. Anyone would, right? You spent a week trying to figure out one problem. Why is it not working? You go crazy about it. So one day I finally figured out the problem. The problem was that there was one dependency that I was using, which was being used by a second dependency. So I couldn't remove that one dependency, which was causing the error. And the second dependency couldn't be replaced because it was used by a third dependency. And the third dependency was used by a fourth dependency. And that fourth dependency was conflicting with the fifth dependency, and so on and on and on. I literally thought that there's no way to solve this, but I kept at it. One fine day, again, it took me about 2 weeks to do this task. But at the end of the 2 weeks, all of a sudden, one day, I just started the application and it just worked. I have no idea how. Till this date, I have no idea how that application worked, but it worked. So I believe there are two kinds of developers in general. You have a theoretical one and a practical one. In easy to understand terms, you can think of it this way. At some point in your life, in your career, you as a developer will ask some questions on Stack Overflow or on Google issues or wherever. And the ones who will answer that question will almost exclusively be theoretical developers. Okay. The practical developer is only concerned with the answer, right? They don't care that much about the whys and the hows. But a theoretical developer would absolutely take care to make sure they understand the algorithm, the logic, the language, the theory, right? But does that mean that any one of them is better? Like, I have written verses, but does that mean that there is a better answer here? Well, depends on the situation. So imagine a situation where you have to implement the security protocols of a nuclear power plant. Whom do you want in this situation? Do you want a theoretical developer or do you want a practical developer? Well, clearly, you would want a theoretical one. The theoretical developer is necessary in these system critical, these highly critical systems. Okay. Alternatively, imagine a situation where you have to implement a button, just a single button in a language which none of your developers know about or have never used. How would you want that to be done? Now, will you want a theoretical developer that will take a couple of days to understand the language, understand the logic, or will you want a practical developer that will probably do it in about half an hour? This is what I mean by it's very subjective. Real life situations aren't black and white. And as anyone would tell you, that if you aren't a bit of both, theoretical and practical, you're actually neither. You're not useful. So let's go through a more practical example, all right, and find the hackiest solution. Have a look at this code. I'll give you about 10-15 seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna assume that you guys have gone through this. One second, I think, yeah, this is visible. So given this language, given this code, create a function that checks if the sum of two numbers is the same as the third number. Now, if any one of you is wondering what language this is, it's a very, very confusing and a very infuriating language. And I would not recommend you get into it. especially since it's a relatively new language, and it's called I made it up, and patent pending. Thank you. Okay, but seriously, in a situation where you have asked to do something with a language that you have no idea about, you've never seen, you've never understood it, how do you answer this question? Let's have a look at some patterns here. Okay, you don't need to know what any of this means, by the way. Even if you're not a developer, even if you're not a coder, you've never done some coding in your life, when it comes to patterns, it's universal. It doesn't matter which field you are in. Okay, so let's have a look at some patterns here. So first line, parse func and func, whatever, update in brackets updated, given in brackets updated name id. Now this looks kind of similar to what a function description might be, right? The definition of a function, which has a return value, it has some parameters, it has something inside, it has a name. And right there, it says Boolean string and long with a single Boolean between these colons and string long together. So it's kind of evident that your updated is Boolean and updated name is string, ID is long. Okay, so a Boolean looks like the return type. That's how you set the return type and the parameter types. Again, don't ask me why it looks like this. Why is it so complicated? It just is. Again, right? So the name of the function contains the variables, the return value, and the different parameters that are involved. The next line, string updated name in brackets. Again, don't ask me why. Read updated name. It's transferring the parameters into local variables. Why? I don't know. It's just part of the function. It's part of the code, the language. It says that you have to do it. So this, so far, the pattern is pretty straightforward. Now comes the next line. This dot get in dollar signs saved name given in dollar signs id. This looks like it's calling the function which is here, right? Get name given id. It's just like getting the name given an id. If I give it an id, it'll give me a name. Okay, so but it's not returning anything. It's returning directly in the name. Get saved name. It's reading it from here directly. So this is giving you a little bit of an idea of what patterns are being used here, right? Then finally, you have your Boolean name updated, read false. This kind of looks like an if statement, right? Given save name is not equal to updated name. This dot save, again, this is calling this function. And finally, it's returning name updated. Okay. So given these patterns and nothing else, let's move on from this code. Given these patterns and nothing else, do you think you'll be able to come up with a solution for this question? Okay. How about I just give you the solution for now? It's not really a real language, so it doesn't really matter. So given this fictional language, you would end up with something like this. You would have a parse func and func with check is equal sum of three numbers, where two numbers are where you're checking the sum of these two numbers equals this number. And this is just returning a Boolean of is true or is false. So you read the three numbers, you check if it's false, you check if the numbers are equal, and then you return a true or return a false, right? Simple. So what is the crux here? What is the crux of this conversation, this talk? Where am I getting at? Now the coder's mindset is a mixture of two major applications. You have your theoretical traits and you have your practical traits. Neither of them are really that better than the other, but they are completely dependent on the situation. So what are the theoretical traits? Now, the first and the most important theoretical trait is strong understanding of fundamentals. If you don't know what a string is, or what a long is, what a function is, hash map, object oriented, doesn't matter if I give you this pattern, right? If you don't know the basics, you will not be able to actually understand anything. So your basics need to be very, very, very strong. That is the only way you'll be able to have a coder's mindset. You don't need to know everything, just the basics. Second thing, patience to read documentation when required. Like I said right in the beginning, most of your work is going to be enhancing existing flows. But there will come times when you will have to implement new workflows or new technologies, new logics. In that situation, your boss or your team may not know the answer to questions which you might have, but neither will, let's say it's a new technology, there isn't much answers out there. There aren't that many answers out there. So you need to have the patience to read the documentation because it is required in that situation. The third part, which is actually very important, it's solution centric research. Let me give you a problem statement. I want you to implement SSL certificates in AWS EC2 servers, right? In this situation, what is solution centric research? Solution centric research is to first understand the black boxes of the problem statement. For example, SSL certificates. Is it that important for you to know everything about SSL certificates? Do you need to know how they are made, how they're implemented, how they are checked? What is the logic? What is the history? Do you care? No, it's a black box. SSL certificates in AWS. Again, do you need to know what AWS, everything about AWS? Do you need to know the pricing? Do you need to know what is a VPC, a load balancer? Do you need to know everything about your AWS server? No, you don't. Again, EC2, you don't need to know how to set it up. The question just says put an SSL certificate in AWS EC2 servers. In that is the criteria here. There are three black boxes. First black box is an SSL certificate, second black box is AWS, third black box is an EC2 server. You just need to ignore them. Your research should be centric on how do I take this SSL certificate and put it in this EC2 server without knowing the intricacies of each one of them. That is solution centric research. Finally, you have the peer reviews. Peer reviews are phenomenal tools. Just remember one thing, no matter where you go, no matter how good you are, you might be the best in your class, you might be the best coder that you know of, you might be the best in your team. You are never the best person for the job. There is always someone better. There is always going to be someone who has more experience, more understanding, is smarter, right? How do you compete with that? We compete with it by using code reviews or peer reviews. And depending on which company you go to, 99% of the companies will have compulsory code reviews for all your work. Everything that you will write, every piece of line of code you will write will be peer reviewed or code reviewed. Now, what is the advantage here though? So, like I said, you are not the best person for the job, but so you will make mistakes, right? But when you make those mistakes and your manager or your team reads your code, the chances of those mistakes being caught are high. And that is the whole point. And it's not just a one way street. You, as a coder, don't know everything. And you're not the best coder, like I said. But when you see other people's code, when you see small snippets of other people's code and try to find problems with it or try to figure out how it can be made better, that improves your coding capabilities as well. So peer reviews are a must. All right. Now, what are the practical traits? So, to be frank, like I said in the theoretical traits, coders are not scientists. We are not out here to do a PhD on every single topic that we're going to work on. You don't need to be a specialist in Java to write in Java, right? But at the same times, we are not monkeys. It's not monkey see, monkey do. You don't find a person hitting a nail with a hammer and without even thinking, you pick up a hammer and start hitting that nail. You have to be somewhere in the middle, right? So that comes with solution centric thinking. So you had the first, which is solution centric research. You, sorry, you only research the anything but the black boxes. But how do you decide what is a black box? That is solution centric thinking. Given any problem statement like the previous one, you need to have the capability or the practice to start pointing out the black boxes. An SSL certificate in the previous problem statement is a black box, and you need to think about it that way, right? So if you think this way, do you need to know every tool and language out there? Think of it this way: when, like 10, 15 years ago, when I was much younger, HTML, knowing HTML or knowing C++ was considered amazing. It was like, okay, you're hitting, you're there, you know things, you are a hireable, you're a coder. Knowing all of these languages which have come now was not even there. Like, think about React.js, think about Angular. They have come later. So technology is always evolving, and these are just the two mainstream technologies that are being used, React.js and Angular. Think about all the other front end languages, all the other back end languages that don't even see the spotlight. There is a language called R, right? There's a language which you can use to create music, literally a coding language that creates music. So technology is constantly evolving. There is no way for you to keep up with it. And that is the point. You don't need to keep up with it. If you know one language, you know them all. This is a philosophy that is very well known in the software development field. You just need to know one language thoroughly, or at least understand the fundamentals of software development. And if you know one language, you technically know them all. That does not mean that they're all the same. If you have Python, it's very similar to C++ or Java or any of the other languages, but they're not the same. They all have the small little minutiae of differences, but those differences are easy to spot. Okay, that comes with the next topic. Learn to read and spot patterns. In any situation, your mind should be thinking, what are the patterns here? What are the simple lines of code or simple lines of logic that I can just understand the basics and I'm done? I don't need to know more than just these patterns. Try and spot the patterns at every step. Okay, and those patterns can only come if you learn to read code. This is by far one of the most practically advantageous capabilities or skills that you can have as a coder. It is to learn to read code. Reading code is 90% of what you will be doing when you get into your careers. Like I said, you will not be implementing new technologies or new logics all the time. Most of the time, you'll be working with existing workflows. And to do that, you need to learn how to read that code. And that is going to make you a much better engineer or a much better coder. How do you practice this though? You might be wondering. Well, it's kind of very easy. Just go to Stack Overflow or GitHub, search for a problem statement, right? And just read the solution. So in Stack Overflow, you'll have a specific problem statement that somebody has asked. And at the same time, you'll have the Okay, so what is the solution for this? The various different solutions. Just read them, and that will give you a very good way of understanding how to read code. And that translates to GitHub as well. So at some point, go to GitHub, go to other people's GitHub, and just read their code and try to understand what it says. Finally, and final, this is more important for your hireability and your likability rather than your capability. If you run into problems, try and put Google as your lifeline, okay, and not your manager. I don't mean that don't go to your manager. Trust me, some managers out there, some bosses out there are really, really good people. They love to help. They want to make sure that they give you your time, give you the solution, but they have their own work. So your focus right in the beginning, that this is something that a lot of people feel, that if they run into a problem, they need to go to their manager or their boss or somebody who's senior to them to find the solution. But trust me, what your manager and your boss, what they are doing most of the time is googling the solution as well. If they don't know it by the back of their hand, which many of the problems they won't, they will just google the solution. So you need to do the same. Well, I say Google, it could be Bing based on your preference. I prefer Google, like most people. But yeah, so just focus on trying to solve the problem on your own. The solution is out there for sure. You just need to find where it is. You need to find the capability or the ability to search on Google and figure out the solution on your own. So these are a few practical and theoretical traits that will further enhance your desirability and your capabilities as a coder. And these are very important to be a successful, or at least in my opinion, make you a better coder. It may not make you the best one, but it will make you a better, and it will help you in your further, in your job further down the line. So yeah, thank you. And do you have any questions?
Hello. Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So, firstly, thank you very much for such an informative session. I'm sure everyone got to learn so much today. I mean, I can tell for myself, I got to learn so much actually. So, now we'll be
Okay, I'm happy
taking,
to hear
I
that.
mean, we have a lot of questions on the comments. So, we'll be starting with the questions. Sir Neha Sharma firstly asks, how much time should we devote to the problem which we are not able to solve in DSA?
Okay, so Neha, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with DSA to begin with. Um, what I feel is that you might learn a lot of coding problems with DSA, and when it comes to the real life, when it comes to the actual working life, you end up not using 90% of that knowledge. Um, I'll give you an example. So I had a couple of my colleagues who were working with me in Cerner, and they wanted to shift their jobs. They were not happy, and they said, "I want a pay raise," so they wanted to shift their job. They started from scratch. They got in after doing a lot of DSA questions. They spent 3 years working, and by the end of it, they remembered none of it because it was not very effective in their work life. They did not use it even one day, and by the end of the day, they had to start from scratch. They had to start all the way from basics. What's a binary search? What is the algorithms used here? So my opinion here is that if you want to go into DSA, keep it as something as a light exercise. Make it something that keeps your mind sharp and might help you in some, like for example, if you have a interview in Google or Amazon, right? If you want to get into that, there are specific DSA questions that they're posted on their website. Try and go through those. Be more targeted in your DSA. So when you say how much time should you devote in a problem which you're not able to solve, it's not really that important. You need to know the solution in these situations because people are looking for, do you know the solution, not can you think of the solution. Does that make sense? So just keep it light. That's what I'm trying to
Sir,
say. Don't
on
put too much pressure.
yes, sir, but actually, I have a personal question.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So I have an add-on question, which I have a personal question. So actually, I'm in third year right now, and I'm pursuing computer science engineering. So we are
Right?
actually pushed a lot towards DSA. We have been told like if you need to do DSA and like algorithms. These two things will only be helping you in the placements, right? And everyone is obviously, I mean, at least most of the people are looking for placements, right? So we are like motivated towards DSA only. They're like leave everything and do only DSA because the companies only want this. So what about that? Because I feel colleges are just pushing the students towards these two subjects.
Okay, you know why I said I have a love-hate relationship with it? This is exactly why. Um, your college is completely right. You need to know DSA to get into a placement, to get for your placements, to get into a company. And the reason for that is companies are scared of going outside the DSA. And this is a common problem. This is not a new problem. This is something that has been commented on by many, many professionals out there. That when it comes to actual work life, you don't use DSA as much, right? But companies use DSA as a segregation sort of who's better, who's worse, who should I hire, who should I not, even though it's not a practical knowledge, it's not a practical experience that they have. So what I would say is you are right. You need to listen to your college, you need to have DSA knowledge, but make it targeted. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't keep it something that you only care about DSA. You need to become the best, you need to have the best ranks in all the DSA questions and so on, and all your geek for geeks and all of these things. Try and be targeted to the company that you want to get into. So if it's Google or Amazon or whatever, target your knowledge to that. And not all big companies are going to ask for DSA. So, for example, I worked in Cerner, which is an MNC. It's out there in the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar company with it's in 52 countries, and they didn't ask a single DSA question in the interview. They didn't care because they understand that DSA is not something that you use in their regular life. So, what are you understanding my answer here? I mean, am I being
Yes,
clear?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so
So
target
actually,
your
this
DSA.
was yes, sir. So also, since like now you cleared like DSA, I thought would be like we would be using DSA like when we are getting placed and we are starting to work in our companies. I thought we would be using, but I don't now since I know that DSA is not the only thing we'll be continuing. So thank you,
Yeah,
sir. So next question. So firstly, am I audible, right?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So the next question we have from Shitid Singh. He writes, I just started learning to code and at times I don't understand the concept right away. How do I prevent getting stuck and what's the best way to keep learning and moving through material?
Okay. So Kshitij, this is where the concept of the practical coder comes in. You don't always understand everything on the fly, but you want to keep up the speed. You don't want to get stuck on one spot. So in those situations, if you don't understand a concept right away, it's okay to come back to it. I wasn't, I didn't understand most of what was being used. All of these, I didn't understand core concepts either right out of college. I was very oblivious to what most of these things mean. I understood the basics. Okay, there's a string, there's a long, and so on. But I didn't understand a lot of these concepts right away either. But if you keep a practical mindset in these situations, you just look for patterns in this situation. So you look for a answer to a solution, look for a question out there which uses the concept that you're not understanding, and look for a solution to that question. And using that solution, look for a pattern as to how that single concept is being used. That is going to help you understand what the concept is later on in life. For example, a binary search. If you don't understand what a binary search is, it's fine. Move on. Just look at where it's being used. What is the reason it's being used in that situation? Is that clear? So patterns. That's my answer here. Patterns. Just move on. Look for patterns in similar solutions, and then use that to understand the concept later.
So also like I mean I feel like many of the coders and the students they are like I think spending a lot of time debugging their code. So like I think that's a big problem. So because once we have completed the code, it's very difficult to debug it. So sir, like how do we manage that? Like do
Um,
we need to rationalize our time on it?
No, you don't. And that actually reflects onto the professional life as well. You'll be spending most of your time debugging, no matter where you go. Uh, so imagine you've done a personal project right now. It has about, let's say, 1,000 lines of code or 2,000 lines of code, and you are getting stuck in certain stages because there's a bug, there is a variable that you misused, or there is a number, instead of zero you made it one, or a true became a false. So you have to go down the rabbit hole and figure out where was the bug and then fix it. That is just 1,000 or 2,000 lines of code. Wherever you're going to work, you're going to be dealing with hundreds and thousands of lines of code, hundred of thousands, like lakhs, right? Lakhs of lines of code. It's going to be much worse because there is going to be a small number or a small variable that was used somewhere down the line that is causing a problem right on the opposite side of your code. And in most situations, the problems are going to be dependency based. This is a very, very common problem which you will find out, that dependency based problems, and dependency based problems are, they just mind numbing. So debugging is going to be your lifeline. I would say don't run from it. In fact, I embrace it, because debugging is the best way of understanding how things work and how things don't work. So that actually comes back to the previous question as well, Kshitij. So if you are running into a problem, debugging that problem is going to help you understand why it's not working, which is going to help you understand why it's working. Does that make sense? It's like that whole light bulb story, that the figure out 99 ways of not making a light bulb, so that the 100th way is you find a way to make a light bulb. That is how you figure out these concepts as well.
Okay, so now I know I'm not the only one, facing the
Not
problem
at
with
all.
debugging. Okay, so the next question we have from Manvendra Singh. I think a very common question this is. When we work in actual company, do we code or document more?
Oh, that is very, very, very subjective. And why I say that, because if you are working in, it depends on what your position is. If you are, most of the time, if you are starting off, if you are a fresher, or if you are the lowest rung in the software in department, you will be given the documentation work. It'll be like, you know what, you figure it out, just document this. But at the same time, if you're in an established company, documentation is usually already present, or they don't use documentation. That is also a case. In many places, documentation is not even present and they don't need it. um, so I don't know if you've heard of this term. It's called agile, agile workflow. Okay. Now, agile workflow tries to minimize documentation. There's a manifesto which is out there. You can go out and read it. It's a concept in agile means fast, right? So how do you have a software development life cycle that is fast and adaptable? And nowadays, all companies want to get into the agile methodology of software development. And in that software development methodology, documentation is minimized. They try and put minimum documentation because it's not important. It is important on the user's front. If there is a client that is using your documentation, yes, you need documentation. But if it's for your own company, for your own code, you don't really need it. And that is what a lot of companies are following nowadays.
Okay, sir. So the next question we have from Ajay Kumar. Does peer programming helps?
Peer programming or group programming, sometimes it's for two people that program together. That is a very common strategy that a lot of people use as well out there. A lot of companies try and figure out, if I put my two of these people together and make them solve a question, it's going to come out better, right? Like the code is going to be cleaner because people are looking at each other's code. And that is a very commonly used platform, but I don't know if it is being that commonly used, basically because if you think about it, you have cut down your work, your force, your workforce in half. Instead of having four people work on four problems, you have four people working on two problems. So you might come up with the best solution for those two problems, but you still have half the productivity, even if the quality is better. So the peer programming helps in situations where you want better quality of your code. You want make sure that the code that is going out there is bug free, that all various sort of features are considered. But at the same time, it doesn't help in situations where you want fast production.
Okay, sir. So the next question is a very interesting question, I think, from Puneet Bhati. If we copy code and overstack flow, etc., does it make us bad coder? I think this is a smart work.
Oh yeah, it's very very smart. Puneet, trust me when I say this, most of coding is copying from Stack Overflow. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter from where you are, which company you're working in, from Google to Amazon to startups, it doesn't make a difference. Most of your coding is going to be copying from Stack Overflow. That is it. Stack Overflow is your lifeline. Just love it, just get the hang of it, figure out how to find sources on Stack Overflow, and just cling on to it. It's going to be a lifeline throughout your work life.
Thank you, sir, for being so honest. Next question we have from Aditya Singh. What should be the first call to action when we see a problem that seem to be too difficult to do?
Okay, first call to action. uh, Assume that there is a solution out there. Okay, why do I say that? It doesn't matter what you're working on, unless it's a technology that is completely new. It's a language that you have no idea, it's a logic flow that you do have it's never been used before. Most of the time you're going to be working with bits and pieces of knowledge, of algorithms, of technology, of knowledge that is already out there, putting them together into to form a solution for a problem, right? Like nobody comes up with, okay, I'm going to come up with a new way of doing this. Most of the time, like Puneet said, you just copy from Stack Overflow. You already copy from other people's work. So the first call of action for a problem that seems too difficult to do is figure out what are the black boxes. Okay, black boxes means that the part of the problem that you can ignore. And one of the ways to figure out that black box is that, imagine in a situation you have to sort using different types of sort algorithms. Now all those sort algorithms are black boxes. For the problem statement to actually work, do you really need to know what those search algorithms are, or can you just copy it over from somebody else's work? Can you just copy it over from Stack Overflow, right? If I tell you to do a tree search or a Pythagorean search or whatever, do you need to know what these are? Can you just not Google them, figure out the black box, just copy the solution over? So your focus should be to figure out what is a black box and what is not a black box. So part of that problem, like I said, if you figured out the black boxes, your problem will now be to put those black boxes together. And that is something which you might find a solution for, or you might not, but it's 99% of the time, I can tell you that somebody out there has given a solution for it. So just search, just Google it, and keep Googling it until you find the solution, and keep trying it. You find one solution, try it. It doesn't work, try another, search for another solution, try it. Hit and trial is the best way of figuring out an answer, in my opinion. Obviously there are other frames of thought. Some people say that no, you need to know the actual way things work before you can find a solution. I say hit and trial, or at least in my experience and from the people I've worked with, most of them just do hit and trial until something works.
Okay, sir. So before going further with the questions, since we are time bound and we have a lot of questions, we'll be taking only the next three questions. So everyone, the final three questions begin now. The question is from Monica Bhati. Sir, can you tell more about what your company actually does?
Sure. So, Monica, my company is called Apice Tech, and we have created a product called Kaizik. And what Kaizik does is it takes the different phases of the software development life cycle. So, in software development life cycle, that means your planning phase, development, your testing, deployment, CI/CD, monitoring, all these different phases, and it puts them together. It integrates them into a single framework. Okay. uh, this is something you might face later on in your career, that most of the teams in these phases are very disconnected. So we came up with a solution to put them together. Yeah, because we're time bound, I won't continue with that answer much. We can just, you can just have a look at it later on our website.
Okay, sir. So the next question is, can you tell me what inspired to be to you? Sorry, what inspired you to be a founder of a company or to found a company? Fine.
Um, okay, so there are two parts of this question, two parts of this answer, Puneet. The first part is that I've always wanted to be a founder. I've always had this vision for myself that I wanted to work for a few years and start my own company. And then my partner came along and she also wanted to do the same thing. So the first part of that answer is because we both wanted to, that was the first inspiration. The second part of the answer is that I saw a problem. I worked and I felt that this was a problem, and not just me, my entire team felt this was a problem. My entire department felt it was a problem, and everyone used to crib about it every single day, and nobody had a solution for it. And then I came back, and me and my partner, we spoke to many other people. We spoke to different CEOs and CTOs and software engineers out there, and we found that this problem is present everywhere. So that was the second half of the reason why we decided to start the company.
Okay, sir. So the next question is from Kshitij. What is the future of web development according to you?
That's a very, very broad question, I would say. It's like a never-ending answer there. You have future of what are the languages being used, what are the technologies being used, what is the different types of avenues where the web development will go. So there is no single answer here. uh, if I had to come up with something on the top of my mind which I have been thinking about recently, I attended a talk recently where they were talking about code versus no code in a way. And in my opinion, this goes back to, I don't remember if any one of you has used this software called Dreamweaver. It was something that was
We have
ages
heard
ago.
about it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was when I was in school, almost 20 odd years ago, where Dreamweaver was a software that could create your HTML pages using no code. It was a drag and drop sort of functionality, and that was something that was, unique at that time. And I feel that as we've gone ahead, that kind of no code environment has slowly taken a backseat to more code environments. But I sort of feel that that no code environment will come back because that increases inclusivity, and that increases adaptability, especially if you consider the amount of technologies, new technologies that are coming out every day, right? So you can't keep up with it. No code is the way for the future, in my opinion.
Okay, sir. So let's take the last question for the day. Monica again writes, why are we taught to memorize code like algorithms, famous problems, etc.? Instead, we should learn to invent solution or do it by our way.
Instead, we should invent solution or do it. Okay. So, Monica, why you are taught is the same way why you're taught history, why you're taught science. It's not because you need to know these things. It's more about, if you know these things, you'll have an easier way trying to figure out solutions in the future. Uh, if you memorize code, think of it this way: when you're a little kid, how are you taught counting? How are you taught maths? You aren't, you weren't taught maths by saying 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? How do you remember tables? You are told to memorize them, right? One is, 1 into 1 is 1, 1 into 2 is 2, and so on till 9 into 9 is 81. Point is, you're told to memorize these things. Why is that? It's because once you've memorized them, later on it becomes easier for you to transfer the knowledge and understand the knowledge. It's not exactly the same here, but it's something similar, right? You start with memorizing the code, you memorize the algorithm, famous problems in school, in college. You will forget them. Trust me, you will forget them. There is no way, for nobody remembers these things. I have no idea what I learned in college. I don't remember. But the logic behind it, the logic has stuck. And that is where it comes handy later on in your life. It's not about the actual solution, it's not about the actual problem, it's about the logic, the way of thinking that sticks. And college, by the way, engineering is all about way of thinking. Please don't take the knowledge as the primary thing you're taking from college. It is not the primary thing you're looking for in college. You're looking for the way of thinking. As long as you can get the way of thinking out of the way, trust me, you will not remember 99% of your things you learn in college. The way of thinking is what will take you ahead in life.
Yes, sir. Now, since you're saying all these, I think it is quite also blamed on our education system, right? We are like forced and pushed towards only gaining marks. So people are actually, I mean, the students are actually thinking that they need to memorize and only mug up things to score because that's all everyone cares about at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
sir.
not it's
So
not their fault. Sorry, I just want to clarify before the
yes, sir.
schools start hating on me. I'm not saying that the schools are at fault. They don't have any other option. You have thousands and thousands of people enrolling every single year, and you need to get them out as fast as possible and have the maximum effective workforce coming out as well. So this is the only solution that they came up with: memorize so that later on the logic sticks. Not blaming the schools here.
Sure, sir. Okay, sir. So thank you so much for answering all the questions so patiently. And I would also like to thank everyone who joined with us today. All of those who are with us right now, and also would like to follow us on our social networking sites. Please, you can check the links on the banner. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. The details, as I said, are shown below. And reminding you all again, the Hack the Mountain 3.0's hackathon is held at the Manavashta International Institute of Research and Studies from 17th to 18th of September 2022. We hope to see you all there. Now, since we are concluding, sir, do you have any parting words?
Um, Parting words. No, I think I've spoken for so long. People are just like, no, please leave. You're done. I'm good. But anyway,
I
yeah,
don't think so,
keep
sir.
thinking. Yeah, keep the coder's mindset.
Yes, sir. Thank you again, sir. And thank you, everyone who joined with us today. This session ends here, but stay tuned. We have so much more in line. Everyone, good night. Thank you for joining.
Good night.